Every Sunday evening, without fail, Amanda and I made the same drive to Belmont. It didn't matter if I pulled a 60-hour week or if there was a storm rolling in. Sunday dinner at the Whitmores was sacred. That meant Amanda's parents, Charles and Evelyn, welcomed us into their pristine, art-filled home like they were doing us a favor, not the other way around. It was always the same. Their house smelled faintly of imported candles and overcooked roast, and their smiles tightened the moment I stepped through the door. The Whitmore estate sat on a quiet street lined with colonial-style mansions, all of them tastefully understated in that particular way old money insists upon. Nothing flashy, but everything curated. The driveway alone was longer than the street I grew up on. Their house had ivy climbing the front columns and windows tall enough to be doors. A staff member usually opened the door before I could even knock. This Sunday was no different. Amanda kissed her mother on the cheek as we walked in. Evelyn's frosty perfume clung to the air like judgment. "Ethan," she said, offering me that tight-lipped smile she reserved for polite strangers and guilty verdicts. "You made it." Charles barely looked up from his brandy. "Walker," he muttered, the same way someone might greet their mailman on a cold morning. I'd done this for 5 years. I knew the choreography. Smile, nod, pretend like I didn't hear the tone. I wasn't there to win them over. Not anymore. I gave up on that somewhere around year 2, after realizing that success wasn't enough for people like them. You could earn millions, own a fleet of trucks, advise Fortune 500 companies. But if you didn't summer in Nantucket and go to boarding school in Vermont, you were still, in their words, rough around the edges. Dinner was set in the formal dining room, like always. A long, polished mahogany table that could seat 12, but was only ever set for 6. Amanda and me, her parents, her sister Victoria, and Victoria's husband Nathaniel, a third-generation investment banker who spoke in numbers and condescension. They'd all be sipping wine I couldn't pronounce and nibbling on amuse-bouches, served by staff who looked as uncomfortable around me as I felt. We sat. Small talk floated like dust in a sunbeam. Evelyn asked Amanda about her charity committee. Charles droned on about some golf tournament at the country club. Nobody asked about my business. Nobody ever did. It used to bother me. In the early days, I tried to work it into conversation. Subtly, I thought. I'd mention a new contract or a major retailer I'd just signed. But they always responded with the same vague, "Oh, that's nice," before steering the discussion back to yacht prices or the renovations at the Martha's Vineyard property. I once overheard Charles refer to me as the truck guy when talking to one of his friends. I just closed a $1.2 million deal that week, but to him, I was still just someone who moved boxes for a living. Amanda didn't see it, or maybe she chose not to. She loved her family, and I loved her. So I endured the microaggressions and the half-compliments, the looks exchanged when I reached for the wrong fork, the sideways glances when I wore a suit that wasn't cut in Italy. I knew who I was. I built something from nothing that used to give me comfort. Tonight, though, something about the way Charles laughed when Nathaniel mentioned blue-collar grit rubbed me raw, like they were all in on a joke I wasn't supposed to hear. My jaw tightened. Amanda reached under the table and squeezed my hand gently, like she sensed it too. I looked around the room, at the crystal chandeliers, the antique silver, the oil paintings of people long dead who probably never lifted anything heavier than a wine glass. And I realized I was tired of being tolerated, tired of shrinking myself to fit their narrow definition of success. I wasn't ashamed of where I came from. My father taught me what hard work looked like, what honesty sounded like. My mother taught me how to hold my head high, even when the world looked down on you. I chewed slowly, listening to Charles brag about the new expansion in their Portland store. Jewelry, diamonds, Rolexes, luxury stacked on luxury. Amanda's family had wealth woven into their DNA. Mine had debt and calloused hands. But my business, my life, it was real, earned. Still, I stayed quiet, because I knew how this game was played. And because for all the coldness in the room, Amanda's fingers were still wrapped around mine under that table, grounding me. And that, for now, was enough. Dinner had barely started when Carter strolled in late, all casual confidence and designer cologne, with Tiffany trailing just behind him. She was dressed in something that probably cost more than my entire outfit, her heels tapping sharply against a marble floor, her hair pulled back in one of those effortless looks that probably took 2 hours to perfect. Tiffany Reynolds. I'd heard the name once or twice before, mostly from Amanda, who described her as a bit much. That was Amanda's polite way of saying someone was intolerable. Tiffany flashed the room a perfect, rehearsed smile, then honed in on me like a heat-seeking missile. "So, this is the famous Ethan," she said, her voice syrupy and fake, with a twist of condescension right under the surface. I've heard all about you. I didn't flinch. Only the good things, I hope. She laughed. Not with me, at me. Well, she said, sliding into the seat across from mine, Carter told me you run a trucking company or something? That you, tell drivers where to go? That must be interesting. I've heard worse. I've been called a lot of things by people who didn't understand what I did. I built my company from nothing, bootstrapped it, scaled it, and now we handle supply chain solutions for some of the biggest retailers in the country. But to people like Tiffany, it was easier to reduce that to something small, palatable, funny. I gave her the same measured smile I'd use 100 times in rooms like this. Actually, I said, keep in my tone level. We provide logistics consulting and route optimization for large-scale retail operations. It's more data science and analytics than dispatching, but yes, we do help drivers get from point A to point B efficiently. She tilted her head like she was listening, but I could already see the smirk pulling at the corners of her mouth. So, basically, Google Maps with a necktie? The table laughed. Not full-on belly laughs, but enough chuckles to let me know they were in on the joke. Charles sipped his wine, amused. Evelyn didn't even bother to hide her smirk. Nathaniel let out one of those nasal snorts, then added, Well, hey, someone has to keep the truckers in line. I looked to Amanda for some sign of solidarity, anything to suggest she might shut this down. But she was silent, her fork pushing vegetables around her plate, like they might spell out an escape. She didn't look at me. I took a breath. Actually, I said, now speaking more to Room than to Tiffany, our algorithm reduced delivery lag by over 32% last year. That meant faster deliveries, lower emissions, and millions in savings for our clients. So yeah, it's a bit more than just telling people where to go. Tiffany raised her eyebrows, clearly unimpressed. Well, I guess that's important, she said, the way someone might compliment a janitor for keeping the floor shiny. Carter's friend in Boston works at Bain, and he said logistics is super hot right now. I guess you got lucky. Lucky. That was the word that always found its way into conversations like this. Like none of it was earned. Like I hadn't spent sleepless nights cold emailing clients, working 18-hour days to fix routing disasters, or sinking everything I had into a company everyone said would fail. Luck had nothing to do with it. Yeah, I said flatly, real lucky. The room shifted back into conversation, but the energy had changed. I wasn't part of it. I never really was. But moments like these made it painfully clear. I sat there, tuning out Nathaniel's brag about his hedge fund's quarterly performance, tuning out Charles comparing wine vintages like he had nothing better to do with his time. My jaw was tight, my appetite gone. I wasn't angry about the jab. Not really. I'd been on construction sites at 14, hauling pallets with my dad in 100-degree heat. I knew what work looked like, what earning something felt like. Tiffany's opinion couldn't take that away from me. But Amanda's silence, that stung. She knew better. She knew what I'd built, what I'd sacrificed. And yet, when it came time to speak up, she didn't. I glanced at her. She was nodding along to something Victoria was saying, acting like none of it had just happened, like it was normal, like I should just take it. And maybe that was the worst part. I was starting to expect this. Starting to accept that every dinner would come with its own little performance, where I played the outsider who got lucky, and they played the part of nobles tolerating the company of someone beneath them. But Tiffany, she was new, and she didn't even try to hide it. Marketing, right? I asked, breaking my silence as I looked directly at her. She blinked, clearly caught off guard. Yeah, I work at a lifestyle brand. We do influencer campaigns and brand development. Super competitive, but I love it. And how's that going? Oh, great, she said, flipping her hair back. We just did a collab with a TikTok creator. Over 5 million views in the first week. Impressive, I said, not sarcastically. So, you tell people where to post selfies, then? The silence was quick and sharp. Evelyn looked up, clearly displeased. Carter frowned. Amanda's eyes finally met mine. And Tiffany, she smiled like she'd just been slapped. I guess we both have our strengths, she said sweetly. I nodded once and went back to my plate. The matter closed. I wasn't looking to humiliate her, but I also wasn't going to sit there and smile while someone pissed on everything I'd worked for. Not anymore. I was reaching for my glass when Tiffany leaned in just slightly, that same smirk playing at the corners of her mouth like she was about to share a secret. Her voice carried, though, just loud enough for the whole table to hear. You grew up in Springfield, right? She asked, her tone all sugar and superiority. I nodded once, not offering more than that. Wow, she said, dragging the word out like it had a bad aftertaste. That's gritty. She smiled wide, as if she just handed me a compliment wrapped in gold foil. I stared at her, and for a second, I said nothing. I just studied her expression. Calculated, insincere, the same kind of expression I'd seen 1,000 times in rooms where people thought they were too refined to be cruel and too clever to be caught at it. It's inspiring, though, she added quickly, tossing her hair behind her shoulder like punctuation. The American dream, right? The silence that followed was worse than laughter. It was a smug pause of people who thought they were better than you and expected you to agree. Carter gave a low chuckle, eyes already darting to his father for approval. Amanda didn't say a word, just stared at her plate, like it might open up and swallow her whole. Evelyn sipped her wine without a glance in my direction, while Charles gave one of those tight, patronizing smiles, the kind that said he was satisfied watching someone else take a jab at me for once. For years, I'd bitten my tongue through dinners like these. I told myself I was above it, that I didn't need their validation. I had built something real. I had employees, contracts, offices, and results. But none of that ever seemed to matter once I stepped through the Whitmore's front door. In here, everything was appearances and bloodlines. Everything was coded language, subtle digs hidden behind civility. And for 5 years, I'd let it slide. But something about the way she said gritty, like I was a dog who'd learned to walk on its hind legs for scraps of their approval, made something inside me go very, very still. It wasn't even the word itself. It was how everyone else responded to it. The way Carter laughed. The way Amanda said nothing. The way her parents leaned back in their chairs, amused, comfortable, like this was all part of the show. Like they were watching some slow play unfold where I eventually bowed, thanked them for the abuse, and kept playing my role. I looked up from my plate and met Tiffany's eyes. You ever been to Springfield? I asked, voice steady. She blinked, caught off guard by the question. Me? Oh, God, no. I've only really driven through on the way to New York or something. Why? Just wondering how you define gritty, I said. Because to me, gritty means my dad leaving at 4 a.m. to haul packages through snow so we could keep the lights on. It means my mom working retail during the holidays so we could afford a secondhand Christmas tree. It means working 2 jobs and putting yourself through college because nobody's handing you anything. Tiffany shifted in her seat, smile faltering just slightly. Evelyn's glass paused midair. Even Nathaniel glanced up. But I guess from your angle, I continued, it means something you wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Something you mock over wine and imported lamb, because it's easy in admitting how lucky you were to start on third base. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just sat there, calm and clear, my fork still resting on the edge of my plate. Tiffany let out a small, breathy laugh like she wasn't sure whether to be offended or impressed. Wow. I didn't mean to offend you, she said. It was just a joke. No, I replied, it wasn't. But that's fine. Just don't expect me to smile while you pat yourself on the back for pretending it was. Carter's expression soured immediately. All right, man, calm down. Nobody meant anything by it. I turned to him. Of course you didn't. That's the whole point. You've never had to think twice about what you say because you're so used to everyone around you being exactly like you. But I'm not. Charles cleared his throat sharply, probably to regain control of the conversation. Ethan, I don't think this is a time or place. No, Charles, I said, cutting him off with a smile that held no warmth. I think it's exactly the time and place. Because this is when it always happens. In little moments, with little comments, with quiet laughter and sideways glances. And every time I sit here and say nothing, I'm telling you it's okay. I'm telling Amanda it's okay. I'm telling myself it's okay. But it's not. Amanda finally looked up. Her face was pale, and she opened her mouth like she might speak, then stopped. I've worked for everything I have, I continued. I didn't inherit a business. I didn't go to prep schools. I didn't summer anywhere. I built my life the hard way, and I'm proud of that, proud of where I came from. So when someone like Tiffany wants to wrap that up in a bow and present it as some gritty little underdog story to chuckle over at dinner, I take issue. No one said a word. Tiffany looked away, clearly uncomfortable now. Carter muttered something under his breath that I didn't catch. Evelyn put her glass down more forcefully than necessary. But I didn't care anymore. I was done playing quiet, done pretending their silence wasn't approval. I looked back at Amanda one last time, and she held my gaze this time, but her eyes didn't say sorry. They said nothing at all. That silence spoke louder than anything Tiffany had said all night. After the tension settled just enough for people to pick up their wine glasses again, Tiffany did what people like her always do. She redirected the attention back to herself, back to her curated image, back to the story she wanted everyone to believe. She started talking about work, as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened at all. So anyway, she said with a sharp exhale, smiling too brightly, things have been insane at Preston and Clark. We're in the middle of a huge campaign right now with a fashion client I can't name yet, but let's just say it's big, like Times Square billboard big. Her voice had that performative rhythm, the way people talk when they're reciting a version of themselves they've practiced. She used a lot of buzzwords: synergy, activation, vertical integration. She spoke in vague, polished fragments, tossing out names of apps and platforms, and casually mentioning things like client exposure and cross-channel engagement, without ever saying what she actually did. I let her talk. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at Amanda or Carter or her parents. I just quietly pulled out my phone under the table, unlocked it with one tap, and began typing. I'd worked with Preston and Clark. They weren't just a name I recognized. They'd hired my firm 2 years ago for freight logistics during a supply chain overhaul. I still had the direct number of one of their senior partners, Dominic Reyes. Sharp guy. We grabbed drinks in Manhattan the last time I was in town. The kind of guy who'd give you the truth without dressing it up. I texted him a quick message. Hey, do you know a Tiffany Reynolds over there? Claims she's up for account manager. Just curious. Tiffany was still going. She talked about pitching creative concepts to high-profile clients, about managing internal strategy meetings, about late nights, pressure, how valuable she was to the team. They're already talking about putting me in charge of a couple of key accounts. Kind of rare, honestly, for someone my age. Her voice was loud, full of self-assuredness, like she was used to being believed the second she opened her mouth. Carter looked proud, as if he'd just won a prize. Evelyn nodded in that glazed-over way people do when they don't understand a word, but want to pretend they do. Even Charles looked mildly impressed, which for him was practically applause. My phone buzzed. I checked a message under the table. From Dominic. Tiffany Reynolds? Yeah, she's a junior coordinator. Just started about 6 months ago. Definitely not account manager material. Who's asking? I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then locked the phone and slid it back into my pocket. I looked back up, waited for her to finish another self-congratulatory sentence about nurturing client touchpoints, then smiled. How long have you been with Preston and Clark? I asked casually, like I was just making polite conversation. She blinked, then smiled back. Almost 7 months. But I've already been tapped for an account manager role. It's kind of fast-tracked, but I guess they know talent when they see it. I nodded slowly, tilting my head just enough to signal interest. That's impressive. Really? She beamed. Amanda glanced at me, sensing something. She knew that tone in my voice. The calm one. The one I used when I was about to take someone apart, without raising my voice. Strange, though. I said after a beat, still smiling. I just texted a friend of mine over there, Dominic Reyes, senior partner. We worked together on a project not too long ago. The pause at the table like a drop plate. Tiffany's smile stiffened. Carter shifted in his seat. Amanda's parents both looked over at me now. I leaned forward slightly, still in that same composed tone. He says you're listed as a junior coordinator. Entry level. Just started. Doesn't sound like account managers exactly on the table, unless something changed in the last 10 minutes. The silence that followed was absolute. Tiffany opened her mouth, then closed it. Her expression flattened for a second, like a mask slipping, but she recovered fast. Well, titles are kind of fluid in our industry, she said, voice tight now. I mean, technically it's junior coordinator, but I do a lot more than that. People already treat me like a manager. It's basically the same thing. Except it's not, I said, still calm. Junior coordinator means you're scheduling meetings, booking lunches, proofreading briefs. It's a fine job, an honest job, but it's not what you just described. And it's definitely not leading key accounts. Amanda looked down. Evelyn set her wine glass down a little too quickly. Charles leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening. Carter looked like he wanted to say something, but wasn't sure which direction the wind was blowing yet. Tiffany stared at me, lips parted slightly. Her face held that look. When someone realizes they've been caught, but haven't figured out yet whether to deny it or spin it. I watched the calculations flicker behind her eyes. I shrugged. Hey, no shame in entry level. I added, voice still light. We all start somewhere. I cleaned trucks in high school. At least your office has air conditioning. Tiffany flushed. It crept slowly from her neck to her cheeks and settled there. For the first time all evening, she had nothing to say. The room didn't know how to move forward. The forkful of lamb halfway to Charles's mouth hung, suspended. The air had gone stale, heavy with everything that wasn't being said. I reached for my water glass and took a sip like nothing had happened. Because as far as I was concerned, it hadn't. Not really. It was just a course correction. A moment of clarity. A reminder that if you're going to condescend, you better be able to back it up. And if you're going to lie, don't do it in front of someone who actually knows the truth. I didn't raise my voice when I said it, which somehow made it worse. So let me get this straight. I continued, looking directly at Tiffany, the same person who was mocking my father for being a delivery driver spends her workday answering phones and fetching coffee. The words landed heavy and precise, and this time there was no polite laughter to soften the blow. Tiffany's face flushed so fast, it was almost impressive, a deep crimson spreading from her cheeks down her neck. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Carter jumped in immediately, his chair scraping against the floor as he leaned forward. That's not fair, man, he said, defensive and loud, like volume could fix facts. You don't know what she actually does there. Titles don't mean everything. I looked at him calmly. I agree, titles don't mean everything. But pretending you're above someone else because of the job you exaggerated does. Amanda was still silent. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even looked at me. Her hands were folded in her lap, knuckles pale, like she was trying to disappear into the chair. I took my phone out again, this time placing it flat on the table, so everyone could see. I pulled up my company's website, turned the screen outward, and slid it slowly toward the center, like I was laying down cards. Since we're all sharing accomplishments tonight, I said evenly, I figured I'd clear up some confusion. The screen showed our homepage. Clean design. No fluff. I scrolled. 47 employees listed across operations, analytics, and client strategy. A map highlighting active contracts across multiple states. Logos, real ones. Household names. Companies that didn't waste time or money on amateurs. I didn't rush it. I let them look. We closed 7-figure contracts last year. I continued, my voice steady, almost bored. Multiple ones. We advise national retailers on supply chain efficiency. Not hypothetically. Not someday. Right now. Charles leaned forward despite himself. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Carter stopped talking. I turned my head slightly and looked at my father-in-law. That's more than your top-performing store makes in a year, Roger. The name hit him harder than the comparison. His jaw tightened. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't have a quick reply. No smirk. No dismissive comment. Just silence. Tiffany stared at the table like it had personally betrayed her. Carter sank back into his chair, suddenly very interested in his wine. Amanda still said nothing, and that silence sat between us like a third person at the table. No one laughed. No one even smiled. I wasn't gloating. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was exhausted. Exhausted from being underestimated, from being talked down to, from sitting politely while people who'd never built a damn thing tried to measure my worth by where I came from instead of what I'd done. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands. I never needed your approval. I said quietly, but I won't sit here and be disrespected anymore. The table stayed cold after that, and for the first time, I didn't try to warm it. I was still sitting there, the glow of my phone screen dimming between Tiffany's silence and Charles's clenched jaw, when Amanda finally spoke. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like glass. You humiliated her, she said. For a second, I thought I misheard. I turned to her, expecting something else, maybe a shift, a flicker of acknowledgement, even discomfort, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at her plate, like it still had something important to say. I humiliated her. I asked, my voice low, stunned more than angry. After everything they've said to me, after all the little jokes, the digs, the years of being treated like a guest in my own marriage, that's what you take issue with. Amanda didn't respond. Her hands were still folded in her lap. Her face was pale, but her posture didn't move. I could feel the weight of every moment we'd shared over the past 5 years sitting between us like a wall. All the times I'd brushed off the snide remarks at these dinners. All the times I'd smiled at being called the truck guy. All the times I'd turned the other cheek, so Amanda wouldn't have to choose between me and them. And now, the second I stood up for myself, truly stood up, she made her choice. You watched them disrespect me for years, I said, voice rougher now, the heat rising beneath my collar. Mock where I came from. Look down their noses at everything I built. And now you're worried about her? Amanda still didn't look at me. Just a quiet, almost imperceptible shake of her head. You didn't have to go that far. I didn't go far enough, I said. And I meant it. I stood. My chair scraped backward, loud and final against the polished hardwood floor. The room remained still, no one daring to speak, no one reaching to stop me. Tiffany stared at her lap. Carter looked like a balloon half deflated. Charles glared, but said nothing. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Perfect, composed, distant. I turned to Amanda one last time. You can stay with them, I said, not raising my voice, not needing to. Or you can come with me and build something real. She finally looked up then. There was something in her eyes, fear, confusion, maybe guilt, but not resolve. Not the fire I hoped to see. Not the loyalty I'd shown her. Year after year, meal after meal. They're my family, she murmured, her voice barely audible. That was my answer. I gave a slow nod. No drama. No last word. Just clarity. Then I turned and walked out of Whitmore House for the last time, and I didn't look back. 3 weeks after that dinner, Amanda and I were no longer living under the same roof. She moved back in with her parents, which honestly felt like the most fitting outcome. I packed what little I wanted from the apartment, left for the rest, and didn't ask for anything in return, at first. But things changed quickly. What started as a quiet separation turned bitter the moment the divorce lawyers got involved. Amanda, or more likely her parents whispering in her ear, decided she was entitled to more than just the furniture. She wanted the apartment outright, spousal support, and a piece of my company. That last part hit differently. The apartment? Fine. I'd already stopped thinking of it. As home tonight, I walked out. Spousal support? I could have argued that we were only married 5 years, that she had resources, that she was more than capable of returning to work full-time. But I was prepared to pay something if it meant ending things cleanly. But my business? That was where I drew the line. The company wasn't just mine in the legal sense. It was mine in every other possible way. I'd built it from the ground up. No help, no loans from family, no handouts. Just time, grit, and the willingness to risk everything I had. That company had my name on it, and I wasn't about to watch a chunk of it handed over, because someone felt entitled to what they never touched. I fought, harder than I expected I'd need to. Her lawyers tried to spin it every way they could: marital contributions, lifestyle maintenance, future projections. I came to every meeting prepared, every financial statement tight, every argument factual and clean. And when it was finally over, I kept the business. Every share, every client, every bit of it. I signed over the apartment without a second thought. Tiffany didn't fare much better. Word gets around quickly in professional circles, especially when someone's been walking around with a fake resume and a louder mouth than they should have. Dominic, my contact at Preston & Clark, wasn't one to let deception slide quietly. I didn't even have to ask. He looked into it himself, confirmed the extent of Tiffany's exaggerations, and within a week she was gone, fired, just like that. Apparently, HR didn't find it charming that she'd used the firm's name to elevate herself at some elite dinner party. Image mattered there. She became a liability. Carter broke up with her soon after. Maybe he finally realized that being with someone who had no problem lying through her teeth wasn't worth the embarrassment. Or maybe more likely, his parents nudged him toward the door once Tiffany's name started showing up in whispers and exit memos. Either way, the fallout was swift. The Whitmores never contacted me again. Not to apologize. Not to gloat. Nothing. Their silence didn't sting. It felt like the closing of a book I should have put down years ago. A chapter one reread too many times hoping for a different ending. I walked away with my company, my dignity, and, finally, my peace. And that was enough. 6 months later, I found myself seated at a corner table in one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. White linen tablecloths, soft jazz in the background, and a wine list thick enough to double as a briefcase. I was meeting a new client, a major player in the luxury retail space, looking to overhaul their entire distribution model. Across from me sat someone whose handshake carried weight, but the man beside me, my dinner guest, carried something far heavier: legacy. James Walker, my uncle, CEO of the largest privately owned shipping conglomerate in the Northeast. A man who had built his empire long, before I ever wrote my first invoice. The kind of man whose name opened doors in boardrooms where last names mattered more than first impressions. I never brought him up in the Whitmore household. Not once. Not because I was hiding him, but because they never asked. They never bothered to see past what they assumed I was. Just a guy from Springfield who got lucky with trucks. I didn't need them to know then. But life has a funny way of circling back. Halfway through the second course, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. 2 people being led to a table across the dining room. Charles and Evelyn Whitmore, Amanda's parents. They hadn't changed much. Same perfectly tailored clothes. Same expressions that somehow blended boredom with mild judgment. Evelyn's hair was pinned in its usual tight sweep, and Charles was already scanning the room like someone owed him a greeting. And then he saw us. His eyes landed first on my uncle, recognition lighting up his face almost instantly. Anyone in logistics knew the name James Walker. The man had been on the cover of industry magazines, spoken at global conferences, and brokered deals with Fortune 100s. Charles Whitmore sat straighter in his chair, then shifted his gaze to me. It took a beat for it to register. I didn't flinch. I didn't wave. I just raised my glass casually as James finished telling a story about supply chain gaps in the luxury market. I listened. I smiled. I spoke when it was time. And I didn't acknowledge Charles and Evelyn again. They watched the entire meal. James, of course, noticed the glances. He leaned in once and asked, "Friends of yours?" "Used to be," I said simply. That was all. By the time dessert hit the table, the deal was verbally locked. A handshake across fine china. Another client added. Another 7 figures projected. Another win. Amanda eventually remarried. Someone in finance. I heard through mutual contacts. A portfolio manager or something equally gray and uninspired. I didn't waste much thought on it. She had chosen comfort over substance. Family legacy over partnership. She got what she reached for. So, did I. That year, my company tripled its revenue. New contracts. New hires. Offices in 3 states. I bought a house on the Cape. White shingles. Wraparound deck. Quiet views of the water that didn't ask questions. I didn't throw parties. I didn't post pictures. I didn't need to. The day we moved in, my dad came down from Worcester. He stood on the deck with a beer in his hand, squinting out toward the shore as the wind rustled his jacket. He looked at me and said, "You did good, son." And I just nodded. There was nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. No more pretending. Just peace.